Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages to talk about writing, publishing, editing, and the whole creative process. There may be rants and raves and opinions that don't agree but are lovingly delivered. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Today, it's all about me, Jeannie Warner, with a happy reunion with Lynn Harrod. Welcome back, Lynn.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thanks for having me come back.
Well, it is my delight, and I had to follow up. Not only have you released a new book, Child of Imago, which I've read and loved, I have to ask you something from last episode. I thought of you the whole time the writer's strike was going on. What's the latest on Concepcion?
Well, Concepcion, the last that we looked at it, we had a couple of meetings and came real close, but it seems like ever since the COVID lockdown, the trail has gone a little cold. It's still alive, but those leads are still in development. So as of right now, everything's kind of lukewarm for that.
I was wondering because of the weird buzz that I think we all have been dealing with one way or another. For instance, I am deeply in mourning about Our Flag Means Death being canceled when it was only supposed to be three seasons, and they made it two. And I loved that there's a lot of people that signed a, hey, we really want this. Plus the head of Warner Brothers is getting in trouble for insider trading. So yeah. I feel like yours could be that way if they ran it for a season and then stopped it suddenly for no reason.
We'll see what happens with it. Like I said, it's still alive, but as of right now, there's other projects that are kind of pulling us away. So we're working on the back burner stuff is now the front burner stuff. So
hey, it totally happens. Okay, good. I just didn't want it to be lost because I read your one sheet, which was freakishly cool to learn about what a one sheet is, and I want to watch that show. I think it'll be interesting.
Oh, I desperately want to watch it. My goodness, I do. I'd be its biggest fan.
Here's a strange question for you. You've got to have written scripts for a few of the episodes already.
Yes.
Have you, in the last, since it's been a year or so, do you go back and look at them and change things still? Do you keep poking?
I did that for a while, but at this point, enough material is written that I actually make an effort not to go back and look at it, because at this point, if the show was greenlit and put into production, any further material would have to be a collaboration between several people. So my job as the writer for now is on pause. If I were to go back and review things, and I would just drive myself crazy, changing things that in the end might be, pointless, until that collaboration begins.
Exactly. And it's just a reminder to everybody, even though you own it, might be the showrunner, you might not be the writer of every single episode. Is that how it works?
Exactly. Yeah, there are shows where there's a single writer, but most of the time it's a staff of writers being led by the showrunner or a head writer.
Right.
And that's where the magic happens. So you want to save some of your juice for that. Any ideas I come up with now might be changed or might be inferior to what we come up with later. So, but for right now, the baby is born. We just got to take care of it as a village,
Excellent. Well, then I'll switch topics and talk about yet another infant of yours, Child of, and I'm going to say it, Imago, or is it Imago?
Imago.
It is Imago. I wanted to say like Iago, except Imago. I have to say I cheated a little bit. The minute I saw her and she was this girl who came to and had no memory and dot tattooed on her hand and picked up a dog, I kind of had a feeling where we might be going with this.
Yeah, good. I'm glad that those little hints dropped here and there to give an idea of the structure. Yeah, people kind of want to know the structure of a story going into it.
It makes me wonder, did you help Nate out all with the double critical series, Adventures in Oz, or?
Oh, I can't take credit for any of that. Nathan is my partner, Nathan McCoy. He's a genius when it comes to that world, and so that's all entirely him.
Well, I cheated because I don't know if you remember, but I was the head writer on that series. So when I read this one, I just started giggling and couldn't stop.
No, that was all him. All that work that you read of his, that was him. I didn't help. I offered, but I would be woefully underqualified to contribute to that work. You guys are far more advanced than I am on that.
Well, we you went different directions, and I have to say, I don't think it's cheating at all to say to anybody who might be wanting to read it, yeah, it is kind of many of the elements of Dot with her little dog might be what you think. But I wanted to say what I liked that you did that was different is that for a post apocalyptic landscape, it wasn't in every cluster of humans living somewhere, not the biggest, jerkiest guy with a gun that was always running it. And that has been my personal flaw with all of these other post apocalyptic online things. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I welcome genre writing, but I like doing it in a way that's personal to me and is different. So, one of the challenges during Dot's journey, the protagonist's journey, is I did not want every place to feel the same, to be structured the same, to have the same purpose. I wanted every place to be different. And I that's when you look at something with an apocalyptic dystopian world, it is easy for everything to kind of feel the same every place. So yeah, that was something I actively tried to avoid that. I wanted everything to feel kind of fresh and unique, you know.
There is something that I liked. I don't know how deeply you have ever read into Maureen Murdoch, I think was the Jungian psychotherapist that was a student of Joseph Campbell, but she wrote something called The Heroine's Journey. And we've talked about this a little bit in previous episodes. And it was in response to Campbell's hero's journey model. And I just liked that you took a female character on the heroine's journey. And I thought that was very cool because it was about going deep and healing and reclaiming and a building up of found family. And that is very much what Dot does. And so, again, salutes to you. That was extremely cool.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that you recognize the value in that. Like I wanted her journey to be, it is a literal journey, but it's also a journey within her own mind, in more ways than one. So I just kind of, I find it underwhelming when someone goes on a journey just for a goal. There needs to be more layers than that, more than just a goal. So she, I like it when protagonists discover things that they hadn't even considered beyond just their goal. And so, yeah, it was important to me that she discovered new places in the real world and she discovered new places within herself.
Well, she did. And she rejected I mean, it is a common idea that, oh dear, you have a girl. She's only 15 years old. Surely the most important thing to her would be safety and belonging. And it has having been a 15-year-old girl, oh dear God, no. That is not even in the top three, things that some girls want to go through. And so I wanted to say, you made her recognize that. It's like, wow, everybody wants to protect me. Everybody wants to put me in a box. Everybody wants to use me for their purposes and say, I will belong and you'll never leave. And you have her reject that. And that is very natural and logical feeling to me as a female. So I really dig that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that perspective.
She does have things that build her confidence. She does not come out of it being overconfident necessarily. And these are often traps that I see in different when you have a single, especially young person going in. You also didn't thank you for not having her falling down sobbing or breaking into tears for no reason or anything, which seems to be, I have read many guys that have written women that assume that we all sob a lot and like, well, no, especially at 15. I can see girls going quiet. I can see them being withdrawn. I can see them being sullen and barely answering, but sobbing, not in front of others. No.
Yeah, there needs to be a reason, whether it's a man or woman or boy or girl, if they have some kind of an emotional breakdown, it can't just be, oh, that's their personality. There needs to be, and at least for me, there needs to be a reason.
Yeah.
And a reason that the reader can relate to, and that would help a lot, you know. So yeah, so Dot's, when the story opens up, she starts out confused and scared, and that anybody would be that way. But she quickly and it goes with her character. It tells you a lot about her. She wants to know why people are fighting over her, and why people are putting themselves in harm's way over her. It's important. Like, why are they doing this in my name, on my behalf? And
Yeah.
that kind of kickstarts her emotional journey, you
Well,
know.
it does, and I was almost going to ask if you'd followed it, so because it was really perfect. There was the inner conflict, which you represent with the two girls, the light and the dark, saying, "Come here, go away. You'll be safe. You're in terrible danger."
The recurring dream, as she when she's asleep, she occasionally has a very vivid dream where she's in this empty void with the two spectral girls. And yeah, they do in a way symbolize uh how torn she is between, saving myself versus saving others, right? Doing the right thing versus you know taking the safe path. So yeah, that was part of the reason for that as well.
I liked the leitmotif you had of what does doing the right thing mean, and that's I think something anyone could ask in this day and age is my grandfather was an officer in the army, and he's like, if your general ordered you to shoot every peasant in that village, you absolutely do not obey that order.
Right, right.
And so that's the I was just following orders people that are actually, but no, you can't follow illegal orders in that way. And I liked that all the way through it, you had characters that were sometimes given commands that were unreasonable or unfair or unkind. And you give everybody, be they vegetable, metal, or cowardly lion, I mean, Wolfman, the opportunity to examine their own motivations and examine their own desires and what does it mean to believe in something and to believe in someone.
Yeah, I mean for me, the best way for a character to question himself or herself is to be given a choice between how they were raised, and how what their instincts tell them. And yeah, and a lot of the characters have that. There's a machine, a living machine in the story that even he has that conflict between his programming and his what he observes, and he is considered flawed for it, as opposed to being celebrated for it, because he's just supposed to, like you said, he's supposed to just follow orders.
Right.
So what's considered a flaw by his creators is considered a gift by Dot. She sees the humanity in that. And the same with her other companions as well, her other friends.
Well, and you had a lovely example because you have Dot and I'm not going to say Toto. Remind me of her dog's name.
Gypsy.
Gypsy. Love Gypsy. You have Dot and Gypsy as an interesting, okay, this one is vaguely human and this one is very definitely sort of German Shepherdy. So when you run across somebody that has become a hybrid of both, the dog soldier, as it were, he gets to see, right, well, what if belonging to the pack means not just doing things because, but doing the right things, not just behaving in an animal nature, but saying, I am an animal, but I can answer to a higher reason. And I kind of liked that he got to look that Gypsy got to be just as much of a good role model because we all
Yes,
Gypsy deserved to be an excellent role model.
Gypsy is a very loyal dog, very loyal companion, and there are characters who are a hybrid of animal and human. And there are times where they envy Gypsy for being a what they call a pure dog, because he is not bound or limited by human emotions. And humans, animals don't second guess themselves. Animals don't doubt themselves. Humans do, right? And so the animal hybrids, they envy that. But Dot reminds, like Caesar, for example, who is a wolf hybrid creature, that's not a weakness, it's a strength. The fact that you can decide what's right and wrong, and whether or not it goes with what you've been taught, or how you were trained, that is a gift. So Dot is she is like the guide for her companions. She guides them into not doubting yourself and following what you believe. And Gypsy is kind of like the control for that. Gypsy is the control for that, just as the other machines are the control for the Abraham character. This is what you could be, but I encourage you to be more than what you're supposed to be.
Well, Caesar was almost the law of the jungle. The strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack, you know? And it feels like when his early pack was picking on him for not that he understood a slightly different interpret of him. But later, I loved that he got the recognition of, no, no, you do represent that this is important.
Right, right. So what was important to them being loyal to your pack? It's not important that they're savage hunters. I mean, it is. But what's important is whatever pack you're part of, whatever family you're part of, you support that family. And
Yeah.
so when Caesar was with a pack of other predator creatures, he was considered lowly because of his beliefs clashed with the packs. But when he joins our protagonist Dot and her entourage, that becomes his new pack. And within that context, he actually excels. He's strong and brave, and he found himself through another pack, and his former family admires him for it.
I did because I felt like his former family forgot one of the most important things that Rudyard Kipling ever wrote. Can I recite it for you?
Sure, please.
When you fight with the wolf of the pack, you must fight him alone and afar, lest others take part in the quarrel and the pack be diminished by war.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And to me, that mattered a lot because they were doing oh, well, at the beginning when we first meet him, he's, oh, well, the whole pack is going to do something bad to him. And I'm like, wait, they've got pack wrong. They're doing it wrong. They're doing it wrong. And I loved that he came through. And after all of that self-doubt, he went on his own hero's journey, parallel to the heroine's journey, and that the other wolves came to respect him for it. And that was awesome.
Yeah, they saw his success or his strength within his new place
Yeah.
as opposed to within their place. And that was important to me. I didn't want the apex predators to just be mindless monsters. I wanted them to have a sense of honor. And again, they look at their human side as a flaw, but it's actually a strength because they have a structure, they have a code. When we first meet Caesar and he's in that terrible situation, that was his choice. He chose that. Like it was part of a traditional ceremony. Um, and yeah, it's whenever possible, I wanted everything to be characters deciding. The character decision makes things more interesting, in my opinion.
It is, and it does. And even I got to admit, Vincent, we all lose our heart to Vincent in the end. I'll miss you most of all, Scarecrow. But one of the things I liked about him was that he didn't, he wasn't the smartest and I didn't know if he was off looking for brains, but I loved his little book that he had a little book to carry
Follows
around of
life instructions.
life instructions. I almost feel like we should write those down for kids, like this is what I know. It's like when when you are angry all the time, maybe you should eat something. If you're frustrated and can't focus, maybe you should take a nap. If you don't like yourself, maybe you should shower. And
Right.
these are things that I want to give adults that I know in addition to.
I mean, people buy self-help books, but wouldn't it be great to get a self-help book written particularly for you by the one person who knows you best? Like, wouldn't that be the best self-help book?
That would be, except for then I'd have to write it for me and then I'd have to read it to me and then I would get really resentful at me all the time.
Yeah, Vincent, he's his flaws. He is a simpleton, and he depends on that book, or he thinks he does, and that book becomes a guide for his entire group of friends after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vincent, Abraham, and Caesar, they all have something in common, and that is they are on an emotional journey and they have no idea in the beginning.
Exactly.
They think that they're just helping this girl on her journey, but in doing so, they each have their own. Um, and that was surprising to me as I wrote it, actually, because when I wrote this, my protagonist had a journey and she has companions that help her, but these her friends were so interesting. They had their own backstories and they just blossomed, and suddenly the book is 600 pages. You know, I thought it was going to be a quick write. It took about a year and a quarter to write this.
And how did you go about it? Did you just sort of start with a scene? What was the first scene you wrote of it?
Well, the first scene I wrote of it was there's a couple of moments in the book. The opening scene, there's
Hmm.
when she it starts off with her in the void. She's in a dream. But then there were other moments where she encounters the rainforest, she encounters the department. And I actually wrote these 30 years ago. The-
Wow.
30 years ago they were a short story. And nothing, as I've said before on your show, nothing of mine goes to waste.
Well, no, no.
Something I
Maybe
jot
just
down
something.
I was like, 12, that I might rediscover it or remember it, and that might fill in the gaps in something I'm working on now. But no, Child of Imago has been kicking around for nearly 30 years, and those scenes inspired the adjacent scenes. And then as I wrote it, the characters, and as the characters felt more alive, they, they began writing their own stories.
Well, I
And it,
feel you. I got to warn you, you almost exactly in this paralleled. I had a dream in this world, and you might not know it, but it was in the desert area where, in a post-apocalyptic world, as it were, that we crossed our own DNA with animals just to have a better chance of surviving in the area, and it it made perfect sense. And clearly, I was already in your strange little world, so I may have to send you a story that is based somewhere else, more deserty, less less jungly.
Yeah, the concept of an animal human hybrid, many authors far greater than I have used it. But my inspiration for it 30 years ago was I actually read an article in a magazine that scientists were trying to take bits and pieces from reptiles
Mm,
and create, like you can cut off a lizard's tail and it grows it back.
yeah.
And like the regenerative properties of certain animals, could we harness that and put it into medicine or regrow human limbs? And the article was written in a sensationalistic manner that, this research shows that one day we'll be able to regrow severed arms or, you know, uh, and that was kind of the inspiration for the hybrids in the story.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it was either that or, like me being a child of LA, you listen to No Spill Blood too many times. So
Oh, so
Boingo
it,
Boingo did a whole song about the island of Dr. Moreau, and I've always loved that.
yeah, I mean, it's always it's usually fascinating when characters are part human, part something else, because it's kind of like, what would it be like if, a human enhanced with and so forth, some other, it's an interesting thing to explore. Um,
It is. And the last thing I wanted to ask about is you went with it's something you used before. You do third person omniscient.
yeah,
What draws you to that point of view?
I kind of, for certain stories anyway, I prefer that point of view because when there's a grand world, I like being given a tour of it by an omniscient storyteller, and also it's a way of getting an inner voice of any and all of the characters. There is a story I have that is a first person perspective, because I feel it fits that. It almost feels like someone uh, reading their journal,
Yeah.
but with Dot, because she has that memory loss and because the world is like a fantasy world, I thought that perspective was the best way to tell the story.
Well, I liked it. And you left us with a little bit of a mystery because we still don't know who or wow or how precisely she was blessed that I caught out of that. So are you thinking sequel?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my books so far are different genres.
I do.
And you know, one of the things I hear is you got to stick to one genre. I find it hard to do that. You know, the next book I'm writing is actually a Western, and I'm torn because I want to do a sequel to Child of Imago. Like that's,
Right.
you know, this Western that I've been working on this for 10 years, but Child of Imago, now that it's out into the wild, I want to stay in that world longer. I want to explore more of it and answer questions and so forth.
Well,
Uh,
here, weigh in on something for me because I too have written in a couple different genres, and serial murder, killing thriller novels are very different from my normal fantasy, sci-fi, historic fantasy noir. So, have you considered doing different nom de plumes for different genres, or you think all of these are you?
I consider that, but not for my sake, but for the readers, because you know, if Stephen King were to write a romance novel, I don't think people would buy it.
Are
You
you
know, so
bad
he
example? We would all rush to buy them.
well, I mean, maybe, or I you know, flip it around if a romance novelist wrote, you know, a supernatural horror. I don't know. I think if you were to to use a pen name for other works, it would be to, you know, give the reader a clean palette, and you know they go into it without any kind of bias.
Stephen, if you're listening to this, we beg of you, write a romance novel because I'm just, it's,
I mean, I remember when Shawshank Redemption, when the movie came out, I remember people watching it expecting horror. They expected monsters and blood and
yeah,
you know, so luckily the movie was so good that it outweighed their, you know, their thwarted expectations.
yeah.
But, you know, I guess, you know, you would use a fake name if I wanted to, like kind of like Garth Brooks when he wanted to explore experimental
Yeah.
industrial pop. He came up with a new character. Um, and
Well, I
this,
was thinking of John always brings up Ursula Vernon because she wrote all the children's books, but she writes adult and sometimes fairly horror oriented under Teen Kingfisher. And I loved that she tried to write a romance novel, and yet, except for all of those people having their heads accidentally cut off, that's very romantic in a really twisted kind of world. So,
I think for now I'm just gonna stick with my own name. I'll take inspiration from Shel Silverstein. You know, whatever he wrote, everything he wrote, he used his own name, even his own signature on the cover.
yep.
So,
And
oh,
Uncle Shelby's ABZ book is definitely for adults. There's no doubt about it.
yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff that I could explore in a sequel for Child of Imago. And, you know, I did not want everything tied up with a nice bow on it. I wanted, you know, what about that blessing? What about the widows? What about, you know, the rest of the purists?
Yeah, I mean, I had interesting questions about here it is. There was one thing, and I didn't know if you meant it, but I wanted to ask it anyway.
Mhm.
You have our girl wandering around, and I'm going to be honest, in small towns in America, I have faith that there would be problems. But you had when we get to the place at the end, it is a much bigger city. And there's part of me that notes that in everywhere in the world, the major metropolises tend to be slightly more democratic socialist because you have to be. So
Mhm.
I'm interested if there was any political ripples within Kellen now that we're there over time too, and how they deal with that.
Yeah, that's a good observation. Kellen is I look at all of the different villages as very, I mean, they're literally isolated, but they're also, you know, socially isolated. You know, so in the village of Colt, everyone has that same strict belief when you're with the widows. They also have, you know, they have their own completely different beliefs, but they all follow it. Helen kind of represents, like Star Trek, the Federation is the melting pot of all cultures, like America is supposed to be,
Yeah.
right? And all the other worlds are singular cultures. So Kellen kind of, in my mind, I didn't want to hammer it home, but when you see the city council, it's made clear that they are humans, hybrids, from different places. They even have former soldiers there.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I kind of suggest that the harmony of a place is dependent upon how the different races and cultures can coexist.
Yeah.
It's-
And I had a short story dream about an ottoman there. So, like I said, I love the world you've created. You created a place that people can dream about the same way I guess Baum did. And I love that you've held it at the end that somebody was actually reading an L. Frank Baum book in Kellen, and that was beautiful.
yes, yeah, I mentioned I'll go ahead and say Wizard of Oz. I mentioned Wizard of Oz at the beginning and the end of the book. There's a scene where Dot is in the library at the beginning of the story, and she picks up that book,
Yeah.
and it's tied up again at the end. And I thought as I was writing the story, the very first you know form of this story was very very strict Wizard of Oz. And as I wrote it, like I mentioned before, the other characters' backstories just became bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it didn't feel like a Wizard of Oz story anymore. And it had the same structure of a hero on a journey, and he or she makes friends along the way, Lord of the Rings, Um, but I was okay with that because it was kind of like it's my version of it. And I like it when a story has a structure to a classic.
Yeah.
Like Moby Dick, the structure of Moby Dick has been used countless times.
It
That
it has.
futility,
Yeah.
based revenge, and what's going to happen. What happens when a character chases down his revenge? It's like in Vegas, when you chase your money, you end up broke, right? And there's so many. So like a simple gambler's tale of like owning Mahoney, he's chasing his money. It's like there's parallels to like Moby Dick in a way. And then there's a character that's along for the ride and observing this man self-destruct. So I didn't mind the parallels at all, and especially by the time the book was done, uh, it was all mine. And I'm sure Mr. Baum would appreciate it.
Well, I think so, especially from everything I've read about him, is he was only going to write one and then he had to write another and then, for money and for the kids in his life. So he wasn't internally consistent. But I have a feeling if you wrote more in this world, it could go in so many different directions because how people react in different areas isn't the same. And so thank you for giving us another journey of Dorothy through a strange, strange land, making friends along the way. This really enjoyed Child of Imago very much.
Thank you, Jeannie, for that. I'm glad you read it, and I'm glad that you saw it in his perspective that I wasn't sure people would pick up on, but it seems like you really got into it.
I did, but then again, I was trapped in summers in Arkansas, and so there was nothing to do but read every single book that he'd written, which the library had. So
So you could write a thesis on Frank L. Baum.
I have so many comments about him, so many. But in the end, he was a man ahead of his time, raised by suffragettes. All the most powerful creatures in his world are women, and I kind of dug that. And I have a feeling that if we got to know Imago later, we would discover that there was somebody else bigger than the doctor.
Yeah, could be. Everybody has a boss, right?
Sooner or later, we all answer to someone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I will definitely. I don't know when, but I will definitely explore more of the world of this story.
I look forward to it. So everyone needs to run right out and buy Child of Imago out there. We will put a list out on, I think your Deerwood Press is the base place because then they can decide which monolith they want to support to get a copy of it.
Great. Yes, yes, it's all there. Mhm.
Excellent. We will put links to the other fascinating things we discussed during this episode on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. Lynn, thanks so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you for having me, Jeannie.
You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web magic is cast by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spiders are David Welsh and John Schmidt. Our intro and exit music are performed by Michael Engberg. Our podcast sponsors are Jackal Designs, The Bean Street, Arm Street, and wherever you enjoy reading your favorite Wizard of Oz book. And hey, thanks for listening.